The trouble with market research is that people don't think what they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say.
Yeah, a heaped teaspoon, tablespoon, and another, and maybe another. There we go.
Oh, a little bit in.
Yeah, that's about it. And then you just.
How much Milo to milk have you got there?
Hello everyone, it's Rigas again from the Practice Research Agency, where every day we're trying to figure out what consumers are doing. Not just what they're saying, not just what they're saying or telling us what they do, but what they're actually doing. And look, it's relatively easy to collect information about what people think, about what they say they do, about what they claim they do. And I'm not suggesting that respondents actually ever really consciously lie. They might be a little nonchalant in their answers sometimes. They might not think about their answers too much sometimes. They might guesstimate what they do rather than really think about what they do. And sometimes they might even idealize what they do rather than actually tell us what they really do, because people are often not even aware of their own behavior. Hence, there is no better way to figure out what people are actually doing. What they're saying, yes, but in the context of what they're doing in market research, the only real way to do that is via engaging the methodology of ethnography. And ethnography is an extraordinarily powerful and valuable tool for research because it allows us to document what people are actually doing in terms of their behavior, whether it be using products, whether it be buying products, anything that actually has to do with a behavioral component is best done using ethnography, because that is the only method that gets you close enough to the reality of the consumer in order to understand exactly what the behaviors are. Now, at the practice, we have probably done more ethnography or ethnographic projects than probably any other agency in this country. And one of the reasons for that is because one of my colleagues, my most esteemed colleague, Nick Agafonoff, happens to be the world's greatest ethnographer. And Nick and I happen to work together. So that is my privilege to be able to work with the world's greatest ethnographer. And as a result of that collaboration, we have executed many ethnographic projects in Australia across many different categories and for many different topics. And I'll take you through some of those today without giving anything away, of course. Now, as usual, for us at the practice, we don't just run off and grab an iPhone or a camera, as it used to be the case, but now it's pretty much an iPhone. Grab an iPhone and nick off and start interviewing people, shoving a phone in their face and start asking questions. It is not that simple. It is not that simple. We have seen that many times, and the results are generally quite laughable in terms of what people are telling us and the kind of information that is being collected. And the reason for that is because you need a process. Every time you do something in research, you need a methodology and you need a process and you need a philosophy for that process, because it all needs to be thought out from the beginning in terms of what you are trying to achieve. And I've got to be honest, from what I've learned about ethnography, it's that it's not really about sticking a camera in someone's face. That is what we are filming, what people are doing and documenting it in order, because that is part of the debrief and that is what forms part of the insight. But the real thing that we're achieving is that we are making the respondent sentient regarding their own behavior. What does sentience mean? It means ostensibly or basically being conscious of what they're doing, because a lot of the things that we do are executed unconsciously in everyday life. The habitual things that we do are executed almost unconsciously, somewhat subconsciously, without thinking about it. This is what happens when you do things repeatedly over and over and over. You end up executing them without even having to think about them. Okay, and this is most apparent with musicians. The point of practice in an instrument is that you can execute a piece without thinking about it. That your whatever part of your body is doing, your fingers, whatever your instrument you're playing is doing all the work, muscle memory. And that is exactly what consumers are doing. They're basically going through the motions of muscle memory when they're doing a lot of things in terms of everyday life, shopping, cooking, selecting, whatever. We'll go through a number of different examples here. So without going through the ins and outs of the entirety of our process, because I don't really want to give it all away, because we have spent a lot of time thinking about it and doing it, without going through the process of how we do it, the process of the ethnography, and there is in terms of an ethnographic project, there is always a couple of parts or phases to it. And those parts or phases are all to do with how we engage the respondent. So it's not just an ethnographic engagement. There are a couple of different types of engagements that we execute with the same respondent in order to make them sentient for our ethnographic phase, where we're documenting and asking them to explain to us what it is that they're doing and going into the reasons behind that and going into the drivers behind that. But in order to do that, they do have to become somewhat sentient about their own behavior. And that is the whole point, that methodological process. Create sentience. Once you create sentience, then the ethnographic phase of the project, where we're documenting, becomes a lot more insightful, a lot smoother, and actually has some context rather than just running off and filming some interviews and saying that's ethnography. Let's go through a number of, we've done so many, and I do want to give you guys, everyone, a sense of how much we've done, but also want to pause along the way and talk about a couple of really interesting things that came out of all of this. We've done several projects, ethnographic projects on energy, and there's always a product in mind at the end, but we've done it for drinks, we've done it for food, and trying to understand, and the ethnography was really about trying to understand people's energy rituals and energy practices throughout the day. And we did that ethnographically by meeting them at certain times during the day when we knew that they were engaging in what we might call energy boosting behavior of some description. It could have been the morning, it could have been the afternoon, it could have been any time during the day. But the point was to capture people at an energy boosting part of their day in terms of documentation. So how they're feeling, where they are, what they're doing, how their context affects what they're buying. So that little snippet of everyday life in terms of energy rituals was really important. One we've done on oral hygiene to work out the behavior and the code of oral hygiene in terms of what people are doing when they're executing their oral hygiene during the day, and at what periods of the day do they need additional oral hygiene as well. So understanding people's oral hygiene issues helped this client design a product. This was part of an innovation project, actually, helping the client design a product that assisted people to maintain a sense of oral hygiene throughout the day. Another project we did was understanding what playtime meant for young kids in Australia today. And we did this for two separate projects where we had similar types of ethnographic ambitions, which was to really understand the reality of how kids are playing today, also their relationship with sports. What is the young child's relationship with sports in Australia today in terms of their own sporting activities, in terms of their own recreational activities, and also the parents. What are the parents' behaviors and attitudes toward their children in terms of what their desires are in terms of their recreational time and what the realities are in terms of their recreational time? Understanding those tensions and how to resolve some of those tensions or how to capitalize on some of those tensions was very important for the brands that we were doing this for at the time. Other things we've done for fast food, this was actually for McDonald's. I can say this, I don't think this is a big issue. We've done a lot of work for McDonald's ethnographically. Quite a while ago, we looked at what we call the fast food or the casual dining experience of the future. And we did that again ethnographically by looking at what certain types of consumers who we identified as living in the future were doing in terms of their, let's call it casual fast food consumption. And from that, we were able to determine where the future might lie in terms of fast food. A number of things came out of that. One of the biggest things that came out of that was Create Your Taste for McDonald's, which was revolutionary for the brand, not in terms of not in the sense that they kept making that product, but it revolutionized the business in terms of bringing in things like screens, in terms of bringing things like the app, where initially were used to customize, create your taste burgers, but later were adopted just as part of the business. And of course, Create Your Taste petered away as a product, but the remnants of it are still at McDonald's, the remnants of that, because it was a bit of a revolution for them. And we did that by, again, through ethnographic research primarily. Another thing we've done again for the same brand was to understand the code of fast food for Gen Z, I believe. It was Gen Z, yes. What they were doing in terms of their behavior for particular fast food brands, including local casual dining, or iconic local casual dining, or viral casual dining trends that they were responding to. And of course, this was for a major fast food supplier, and they wanted to understand what the codes were of that particular generation. And again, we did that ethnographically. We went into their homes. We went out with them in terms of when they went out to buy casual food or fast food. We spoke with them and their friends, and we documented all of this. Again, one big use of ethnography is customer journey and ordering. Again, what happens from the time people get out of their car to their ordering, to their consumption. That entire journey has to be done ethnographically. There is no way someone can give you the nuances of all of that simply through their memory. And I know we often rely on people's memory for this sort of stuff, but nevertheless, again, the ethnography showed us exactly what was going on. And when we combined that with eye tracking, it provided a lot of rich information, basically. Even things like dinner experiences. What is it like to have dinner at a certain fast food restaurant, in order to understand whether that was something that they could capitalize on or whatever. Buying mattresses and bedding. What are people looking for? What's happening when people want to buy bedroom products, and especially mattresses? Again, we had to do this ethnographically because we had to go into their homes, we had to document their bedrooms, we had to understand what their needs were, we had to understand what their aesthetic was, and then we went shopping with them in order to understand how they would select, what happened in store, how they would select things like mattresses and bedding and so forth. There was a project on sustainability. Very, very interesting, because this was where the ethnography really worked well, because this is an area where people claim they do a lot of things and they idealize their behavior. But in reality, what they're actually doing is far from what they're telling us, and far from what they think is ideal in terms of their sustainability practices inside and outside the home, but mainly inside the home. And we were actually also able to work out the code. What is the emotional code of sustainability? And how can a company capitalize on that? Okay. And this was extremely eye-opening for the client in terms of what sustainability actually meant for the consumer, and how it was encoded, and how they behaved around it, and how they responded to sustainability messages. Very interesting. Things like making a weekday dinner. This was very shopping for and cooking. The everyday meal is something that lends itself beautifully to ethnography, because now a lot of the time people are shopping before they cook. They, on their way home, they shop, they buy ingredients, they take them home. Not everyone does that, of course, but that is an increasing behavior. And we were able to capture all of that and then understand what's going on during a weekday dinner. And the results are absolutely eye-opening. They're eye-opening because if you switch on the TV, there are 100 cooking shows on the TV, right? Some of the most famous celebrities in the world are chefs, people who show us how to cook stuff in our own kitchens, etc., etc. The Jamie Olivers of this world, etc. Turn on the telly and it's cook and cuisines and passion and food and all that stuff. That's definitely what the culture looks like when you look at it on the telly. But when you actually look at it in terms of reality, what are people actually doing for their daily meals, we were shocked and later quantitatively validated to find out that on average people are spending what, 30 to 40 minutes on their main daily evening meal. 30 to 40 minutes. Now, are we surprised with all these shows, 30-minute meals, 15-minute meals? They're responding to what people are doing, right? What is it telling us about our culture that we only spend 30 to 40 minutes preparing the most important meal of our day culturally in Australia, which is dinner? Because it fulfills a lot of functions, dinner. It's not just food. I guess it's where the family comes together to a certain extent, et cetera, et cetera. Although we know that's all waning anyway. We know that's all waning. But nevertheless, we're able to see this. We're actually able to document it. What is it telling us about a culture that only spends 30 minutes on their evening meal? Let me put it to you this way. On any given day, an Australian might spend more time watching other people cook on TV than they are actually spending cooking themselves. That is the power of ethnography. You think one thing is going on, the reality is that they do not. They are spending a very small amount of time on their weekday meals, which is most meals in the week. So most meals in the week, we are spending very little time making them. What does that tell us? That tells us a lot. That told that client a lot about the products and about the marketing and all kinds of things. And we even went more specifically than that once. We actually wanted to understand the use of poultry in everyday meals. It was a little bit of an innovation project as well. What are people doing with poultry? How can we capitalize on that? We've done ethnography on buying a car and the dealership experience, where literally we meet people at a dealership and they're going through the motions of buying a car. They are, in fact, looking for or thinking about a new car anyway. We're recruiting them on that premise, and we are taking them and then documenting their experience at certain dealerships with certain brands in order to understand what effect that has in their selection of the brands. Because let's face it, you've got a brand in mind, you turn up to a dealer and you don't like that experience. It might turn you off the brand, it might not, it just depends. And plus dealers compete with each other anyway. So this was for a very large dealership network engaged in the selling of a couple of very big brands. We once did a ethnographic project on the meaning of local. What does local mean in an urban area? And again, the ethnography told us a lot, because here it matters a lot, because local was all in the context of, do I have a feeling of local where I live? Do I have a feeling of local? And we found that feeling is, let's say, correlated highly with your geography. If you're in an area, I guess that is a bit more, in a sense, isolated to an extent, or a peninsula, or even a regional area, you might get a sense of local. Where in Sydney suburbs, where one suburb melds into another without any sort of indication except a sign, the meaning of local, there was not much of a local feeling in that situation. And again, it varies, but it's very difficult for people in highly urbanized areas to feel local in a sense. We did the connected household of the future, where we understand the impact of connected technology in households. That was a very big study. Or living with a disability for a superannuation and insurance company, life with disability, what that was like, what those people needed. The use of noodles in cooking, shopping for and buying red and cooking with red meat. All of these things had to be studied ethnographically in order for us to be able to determine the reality of people's behavior and how that could in fact be applied to marketing. Ethnography is ultra face-to-face in the sense that you are with the respondent, you are documenting them, you are in their more intimate aspects of their lives. So it is very intimate and qualitative to that extent. So that is the challenge, really. And because of that, I guess, that heavy face-to-face burden, we have adapted the ethnographic techniques for the modern environment. Okay, so the modern environment means we're able to do remote ethnography to an extent. We're able to interact with consumers via their own cameras, via their own phones, and they are able then to use their cameras as point of view instruments, in order for us to be ostensibly conduct remote ethnography. So we are speaking to them, and they are documenting, in a sense, what they're doing and what they're looking at for us as well. So that is how we've adapted ethnography, so that it's no longer burdened by a lot of face-to-face work, but is then also supplanted by what we call remote ethnography. And we've devised even yet another more up-to-date way of collecting ethnographic information, which we call auto-ethnography, whereby we brief a large number of respondents to document a certain activity themselves, and we brief them using video. In fact, as you can see here on the screen, we brief them using video. People are now savvy enough in terms of their phones, in terms of technology, to be able to do this. And they use their phones, they follow the instructions, and they do what we call a self-documentation of the certain things that we wish to understand. It is not extensive. It is for more specific types of purposes, because that's the only thing that respondents can muster on their own, like a 5 to sort of 10-minute process for them. And they upload that video for us, and then we will take that and analyze it. And we might also we generally also interview some of them as well remotely to understand certain elements as well. So there are ways whereby we can update the methodology, and we have updated the methodology of ethnography so that it is less reliant on what we call the heavier time and cost burdens of pure face-to-face ethnography, at least, because we always want to do some of it, and that face-to-face can be complemented with remote ethnography and also with auto-ethnography. So within the same project now, we are able to stratify the samples. So we do a little bit of face-to-face, a little bit more remote, and quite a lot of auto, okay, whereby we are starting with a broader context with the face-to-face, longer interviews, a broader context, and then with each part of the methodology honing in. And by the time we get to the auto-ethnography, we've actually honed in the ethnographic investigation into certain specific things that we brief those respondents on in order that they provide us the insights and the information that we need. So we will leave it at that today. Thank you again very much if you've listened this far, and we will speak again very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.